November 15, 2023. Amanda Foster failed her 23rd driving test at the California DMV. The examiner marked her file with a red stamp, permanently ineligible. 3 hours later, she entered a restricted military facility that fewer than 50 people in America had clearance to access. The connection between these two events would remain classified for months until a leaked Pentagon document revealed the shocking truth about why America's most elite pilot could never be allowed to drive. The story of Amanda Foster began like any other military career, or so everyone thought. Born in 1978 in a small Nebraska town, she grew up watching fighter jets streak across the Midwest sky from nearby Offutt Air Force Base. Her teachers remember her as quiet, methodical, almost obsessively precise in everything she did. Except for one strange detail that nobody could explain, she had an absolute inability to judge distances on the ground. Which city in the world are you watching this video from today? Please subscribe and support us for more stories. Her high school driving instructor, interviewed years later by military investigators, described teaching Amanda as the most frustrating experience of his 30-year career. She would confuse left and right, misjudge the width of lanes, and once drove straight through a stop sign into a cornfield because she couldn't estimate how far away it was. After her 7th failed attempt at age 18, her parents simply gave up. Amanda Foster would navigate her entire teenage years on foot, by bicycle or catching rides with friends. What nobody understood at the time was that Amanda Foster's brain processed spatial information in a way that would later be classified as a military secret. In 1997, Amanda Foster walked into an Air Force recruitment office. The recruiter almost turned her away when she admitted she didn't have a driver's license. Standard protocol required all Air Force personnel to have basic vehicle operation capabilities. But her ASVAB scores changed everything. She had scored a perfect 99 in the aviation information section, something the recruiter had seen only twice in 15 years. More puzzling, her spatial apperception scores were off the charts, but only for 3-dimensional navigation. For 2-dimensional navigation, she scored in the bottom 2 percentile. The Air Force psychologist who reviewed her test results immediately flagged her file. This wasn't just unusual, it was unprecedented. Amanda Foster's brain seemed hardwired specifically for aerial combat, while being completely incompatible with ground navigation. Within 48 hours, her file had been transferred to a special recruitment program that officially didn't exist. The truth about Amanda's condition wouldn't be fully understood until years later. Military neurologists would eventually discover that she had a rare form of spatial processing that affected fewer than 1 in 10 million people. Her brain couldn't properly process 2-dimensional navigation on flat surfaces, but when it came to 3-dimensional space, she possessed abilities that bordered on superhuman. She could track multiple objects moving at different speeds and trajectories simultaneously, calculate intercept angles instantly, and maintain perfect spatial orientation even in complete darkness. Her flight training at Randolph Air Force Base in Texas became the stuff of legend. Instructors watched in disbelief as Amanda performed maneuvers that shouldn't have been possible for a student pilot. She could maintain perfect formation flying by instinct alone, execute complex aerobatic sequences on her first attempt, and land in conditions that would ground veteran pilots. But the strangest part happened every day after training. While other pilots drove themselves home, Amanda would wait at the base bus stop, her extraordinary abilities useless the moment her feet touched the ground. The Air Force faced a dilemma. Regulations strictly required all pilots to maintain a valid driver's license. It was considered a basic safety requirement. How could someone be trusted with a multi-million-dollar aircraft if they couldn't operate a simple car? But Amanda Foster was proving to be possibly the most naturally gifted pilot they had ever discovered. The solution came from the highest levels of the Pentagon. Amanda Foster would be transferred to a black operations program, where normal regulations didn't apply. Between 2001 and 2023, Amanda Foster's official military record shows her stationed at a desk job in logistics at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio. The reality was entirely different. She was actually flying the most classified aircraft in America's arsenal from a facility in Nevada that appeared on no maps. Her missions ranged from testing experimental aircraft that could reach the edge of space to combat operations so sensitive that even their existence was denied. The combat missions were where Amanda truly excelled. Declassified fragments of after-action reports describe abilities that seemed impossible. She once tracked and engaged 6 enemy aircraft simultaneously in a night operation over hostile territory, something military doctrine claimed couldn't be done. Another report mentions her flying through a canyon at supersonic speed in zero visibility conditions, relying entirely on instruments and instinct. She completed 200 combat missions without a single failure, earning her a kill ratio that remains classified but is rumored to be the highest in Air Force history. Her fellow pilots, the few who knew she existed, developed an almost superstitious reverence for her abilities. They noticed things that couldn't be explained by training alone. Amanda could sense threats before they appeared on radar, predict enemy pilot behavior with uncanny accuracy, and push aircraft to limits that engineers swore were impossible. Yet this same woman needed an escort to navigate the base on foot because she would get lost between buildings she had walked between hundreds of times. The most remarkable mission of Amanda Foster's career took place on March 7, 2019, though it wouldn't be partially declassified until 2024. 3 advanced enemy fighters had penetrated American airspace using a new stealth technology that made them nearly invisible to radar. Amanda was scrambled in an experimental aircraft that officially didn't exist. What happened over the next 47 seconds changed modern air combat doctrine forever. Using a combination of instinct and her extraordinary spatial processing abilities, Amanda engaged all 3 aircraft simultaneously in a battle that took place at speeds exceeding Mach 2. Satellite footage, heavily redacted, shows movement patterns that physics professors claim shouldn't be possible. She shot down all 3 aircraft using techniques that are still being studied and remain mostly classified. The entire engagement lasted less than a minute, but military analysts would spend years trying to understand how one pilot had done what doctrine said would require an entire squadron. The physical toll of these missions was severe. Flying experimental aircraft at extreme speeds and G-forces that would incapacitate normal pilots, Amanda's body began breaking down by her early 40s. Medical reports describe compression fractures in her spine, severe joint deterioration, and neurological symptoms that doctors struggled to understand. Yet she continued flying missions that nobody else could survive, let alone complete successfully. The transportation situation became increasingly absurd as her career progressed. The Air Force spent millions developing workarounds for her inability to drive. She had a dedicated driver for ground transportation, lived in base housing within walking distance of facilities, and had special authorization to use military transport for any movement. The annual cost of these accommodations exceeded $200,000, but the Pentagon considered it a bargain for keeping their most valuable pilot operational. Her colleagues developed elaborate systems to help her navigate on the ground. Buildings were marked with color-coded signs only she used. Paths were painted on the ground. Between facilities she frequented, one junior officer was specifically assigned to ensure she made it to briefings in the right buildings. It was a surreal contradiction. The woman who could navigate through asteroid fields and experimental spacecraft needed help finding the base cafeteria. The investigation into her spending habits in 2024 nearly exposed everything. When Pentagon auditors discovered she had spent $87,000 of her personal money on Uber rides over a decade, they launched a fraud investigation. They couldn't understand why someone with access to military drivers would spend their own money on civilian transportation. The answer was simple but classified. Amanda used Uber for personal trips to maintain her cover. Every receipt, every driver, every route had been monitored by intelligence services to ensure operational security. The turning point came in October 2023. During a routine medical examination, doctors discovered that Amanda's unique neurological condition was deteriorating. The same brain architecture that made her an extraordinary pilot was beginning to fail. She was given a choice: retire immediately with full honors and a medical pension, or continue flying with increasing risk. Amanda chose to continue, but the Air Force made a fatal bureaucratic error. Someone in personnel flagged that her file showed no valid driver's license, triggering an automatic review. A well-meaning administrator, unaware of her classified status, scheduled her for a mandatory driving test to maintain her military clearance. The irony was lost on nobody. America's most decorated pilot being forced to take a civilian driving test she was guaranteed to fail. November 15, 2023, became a day of bitter comedy and tragedy. Amanda Foster arrived at the California DMV, knowing she would fail. The examiner, a veteran of 20 years, later described it as the worst driving performance he had ever witnessed. She drove onto the sidewalk within 30 seconds, confused the accelerator with the brake twice, and ended the test by slowly driving into a parked police car at 3 miles per hour. The examiner, frustrated and confused by this middle-aged woman's complete inability to perform basic driving tasks, marked her file with the rare designation of permanently ineligible. 3 hours after this humiliating failure, Amanda Foster climbed into the cockpit of an aircraft so advanced that its existence wouldn't be acknowledged for another decade. She flew a mission over the Pacific that involved intercepting and photographing a hypersonic vehicle from a rival nation, executing maneuvers at speeds and altitudes that pushed the boundaries of human survivability. She completed the mission perfectly, as she always did, then returned to base where a driver was waiting to take her home because she couldn't navigate the base parking lot. The leaked document that exposed Amanda Foster's story in mid-2024 sent shockwaves through military and civilian circles alike. Here was proof that the military had been hiding capabilities and personnel that defied conventional understanding. The public struggled to comprehend how someone could be simultaneously the most skilled pilot in American history and unable to perform a task that millions of teenagers mastered easily. Neuroscientists who studied the leaked information proposed theories that challenged established understanding of human cognition. Amanda Foster's condition suggested that the human brain could be so specialized for certain tasks that it became incompatible with others. Her case became a cornerstone study in neuroplasticity and cognitive specialization, though most of the data remained classified. The Air Force was forced to officially acknowledge Amanda Foster's existence in August 2024, though they revealed only the bare minimum. She was credited with significant contributions to aviation testing and received a medal in a private ceremony. The citation was so heavily redacted that only 7 words were visible. But those who knew the truth understood that Amanda Foster had single-handedly advanced American air superiority by decades. Her retirement in December 2024 was marked by a series of strange events. Radar systems across the western United States detected an unknown aircraft performing impossible maneuvers at extreme altitude. The craft spelled out AF in contrails visible from space before disappearing. The Air Force denied any knowledge of the incident, but satellite imagery showed Amanda Foster standing on the runway at the exact time, looking up at the sky with tears streaming down her face. Today, Amanda Foster lives in a modest apartment in Colorado Springs, within walking distance of everything she needs. She takes the bus to the grocery store, walks to medical appointments, and relies on food delivery services. Her neighbors know her as the quiet woman who seems confused by simple directions, but spends hours watching planes fly overhead with an expression of longing that breaks hearts. The full extent of Amanda Foster's contributions to American air power remains classified. Conservative estimates suggest she flew over 2,000 hours in aircraft that officially don't exist, completed missions that redefined what was considered possible in aerial combat, and tested technology that won't be publicly acknowledged for decades. Yet she will never legally be allowed to drive a car. The final irony of Amanda Foster's story came in January 2020. The Air Force announced a new training program for pilots, based on lessons learned from an unnamed pilot's career. The program specifically looks for individuals with unusual cognitive profiles, particularly those who show extraordinary abilities in specific areas while struggling with seemingly simple tasks. They're looking for the next Amanda Foster, though they know they'll probably never find another pilot who could fly through the stars but couldn't navigate a parking lot. Military historians who have studied the classified portions of her record believe Amanda Foster may be the most important military aviator since Chuck Yeager. Her contributions to aerial combat, aircraft testing, and the understanding of human performance in extreme conditions advanced American capabilities by generations. Yet her story remained hidden because it was too strange for the public to believe. A pilot who could dance with death at Mach 3, but needed help crossing the street. The leaked Pentagon document concluded with a single line that summarized the paradox of Amanda Foster. She couldn't drive to the base, but she could fly to the stars.